Hello, everybody. I just opened things up. We're getting people to jump in here. We got a decent attendance today. So I'm going to give it a minute or so to let everybody get in, and we will jump into update on the two most recent bills. Appreciate everybody being here today. You see, I got quite a cast with me today on camera right now. We got a lot to go over, and we're 20 seconds after, but I really want to give everybody a few minutes to get in here. When I see a slowdown and people getting in is when I will start. I'm going to give it 20 more seconds and we will jump in here. Again, thanks for everybody as you get in. Appreciate you being here today. Appreciate you being here every time we do these. This is a lot of fun for us and hopefully informative to you. And it's going to be an interesting one today. I don't, probably some of you have been on these before. I don't typically get nervous before these. This is a new one. I was a little antsy today as we got ready for this, and I was changing the slides up until about 20 seconds before we started. So a little behind inside baseball information there. All right, we're a minute past. I want to get going. Again, thanks everybody. We are here today to talk about the changes that have just occurred and new enactments of laws that came out of the CHIPS bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. Some of the key things we're going to touch on, you see here is the R&D, the 170D, the 45L, and other tax credits and incentives. John Kapral is going to dig into some new things at the end of the presentation as well. The people you see with me today, some of these you've seen on camera before. Marlon heads up our 179D. He's going to be a very busy and important man in the coming years with all the enhancements that happen in 179D. Dave is 45L director, ditto to Dave as well. A lot of enhancements in 45L, which we'll go into deeper. Nick Pantaleo, who you don't see on screen, is often with me and is behind the scenes today to help answer any questions that you might have. If you do have questions, type them into Q&A as we go here, and Nick and others will be behind the scenes trying to answer those questions. One thing I normally asked, I told you I was flustered today. One thing I normally ask before we start and didn't, I just want to verify everybody can hear me and see the slides. So if you could put in chat that you do hear my words and that you see the slides. Not as important to see me, I guess, but let me know that you are on and see what's going on here. I just need one person at least to let me know. People are raising their hands. All good. We got an all good from Mark Reese. A lot of hand raising going on. Why is this? This concerns me. Are people not hearing me, Mark?
I don't think it's that.
Okay. But
hey,
nobody's put in the chat.
Is disabled, but
oh, sorry. Okay, maybe the hands. Why is the chat disabled? All right. Hey, put in the Q&A then. So people are saying chat this is disabled. Okay, but obviously you hear me in the chat. Okay, in the Q&A. Thank you for that, everybody. All right, I took an extra minute there that we didn't need to take, but again, appreciate everybody letting us know. Nick is here today, as well as Randy Burge, who Randy's going to go into part of the changes in the R&D. There's some really good opportunities for tech startups, and Randy has a background in that, so he will talk about that. And then John Kapral, you've seen on these as well, but John's the man that knows just about everything when it comes to tax, at least in my mind, he does. So that's who I would have with today. Myself, I keep saying this. Apparently you can tell by the number of words next to my picture compared to everybody else. My ego must be bigger than everybody else's, but I'm going to blame our marketing department on this. They write my bio. I found Trimerit 15 years ago. I host a podcast. I write a lot of articles. I speak at webinars and conferences. People think I'm somewhat influential in the industry and was recently appointed into its tax council. That's about me. I'm really concerned with why there's so many hand raising. If there's an issue and you're raising your hands, the chat is disabled. We know that. You can put the question in Q&A if there's something that's coming up, but I got lots of hand raises going on here. Trimerit. who are we? We are a specialty tax consulting firm. We support tax preparers and their clients with many different credits and incentives. We help you as the tax preparer lessen the tax burden on your clients' a final tax bill. Our philosophy from day one, 15 years ago, is to spend more time qualifying, quantifying, and documenting credits and incentives. So we would spend less time on defending credits and incentives, and that's played out for us over the years. And you see the opportunities that we work with. I'm not going to go over that list. Understand that we are made up of scientists, engineers, CPAs, attorneys. We cover the entire country. We've done studies, I think, in every state at this point, and we really are there to help you identify opportunities within your client base and within prospective clients. Very proud of the fact that just 2 weeks ago, we were listed in the Inc. 5000, America's fastest growing private companies list. We were on the list. I think we were near the 5,000 number, but we made the list, which was very exciting. That's a testament to all the hard work that everybody that I work with does out there. All right, here's what we're going to talk about today. And John, Randy, Marlon, if you guys want to turn your cameras off now, I'll pull you back in when it's time for you guys to get in here. In the meantime, here's what we're going to talk about. These two acts, obviously a lot to digest in these two acts. Things have happened more so in the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, but some very significant things in the CHIPS bill. A lot of money going into the economy around manufacturing and specifically around the chips and that. So we will dig into both. We kind of look at these together because it really should, I think, be looked at together. And John will probably talk about that a little bit as we go. And in fact, our research software, CCH, actually puts these together when it lumps them together when it talks about it. This order, we're going to talk about, change it a little bit. We're going to put the John session, which I put as ITC. It's going to be a few different things, but John's going to go last. R&D is going to go after 45L. Real quick, CHIPS, the CHIPS and Science, technically it's called. It's really out there to strengthen American manufacturing. This is a press release that came right from the White House, but this is what the point of this is. But why was it needed? I think that's more important. The U.S. share of commercial semiconductor manufacturing has declined from 37% in 1990 to 12%. And we see this in the supply chain issues we've had recently, obviously, that we've had an issue with semiconductors. And so what IRS is trying to, not IRS, what Congress is trying to do, what the White House is trying to do is just put more resources in to keeping this essential a part of our economy, essential part of our manufacturing economy in the US. And so there's a lot of incentives around there, not just CHIPS in general, but just education around workforce education. And so it's a really interesting bill, and we'll dig a little deeper into that. Inflation Reduction Act has some key things in there. It's got the corporate minimum tax we're not going to dig in today. It's got this 1% excise tax on stock repurchase. We're really not going to get into that as much today. There's the increased funding for IRS. There's the pass-through loss limitations. There's these things out there. We can get deeper into those if we wanted to. Really what we're going to concentrate on is these last two on the IRA today. The R&D tax credit for startups, which is going to be a key. And there's so many incentives out there around green energy and energy efficiencies. That's what we're going to concentrate on today. Couple things that we had hoped, and you probably had hoped, were in these bills that were not. They were left off, and we'll touch on the 174 capitalization rules at the end. This is a big deal. I've talked about it quite a bit this year. We are running out of time to get rid of these rules, and so we'll talk about that at the end. And then the SALT deduction, everybody had hoped that that would be changed in this one of these two bills, or even later this year. It doesn't look good that that'll happen. First thing, 179D. 179D is the energy efficient commercial building deduction. What I'm going to do is give you a quick definition of what this is, and then we're going to dig into these changes because changes are significant. And then we're going to pull Marlon in and see what the effect of these changes are going to be. This is the 179D is a deduction for really 2 users historically, now 3 users starting in the year 2023, and that's commercial building owners and designers of government buildings. Starting in 2023, designers of tax-exempt entities can also use this. And what happens is the designer gets this deduction allocated to them. This has been around a while, since 05. It actually, the 179D became permanent at the end of 2020 in the Consolidated Appropriation Act. And really what we're going to talk about is the significant changes that have happened to the deduction in the IRA. I think I like saying IRA rather than Inflation Reduction Act. The current law or the current regulations as written are accelerated depreciation for energy efficient commercial buildings. That's really what it is for the owner of a commercial building. Historically, it's been $1.80 a square foot or up to $1.80 a square foot. This year in 2022, it's $1.88 a square foot. That's the value of the potential deduction. That deduction can be broken into separate components, and we can get a smaller deduction if we don't hit the entire $1.80 or $1.88. To hit a $1.88 deduction, we have to show that this commercial building, or up until 2023, that'll expand to not tax exempt buildings, or currently in 2022, government buildings, we have to show that one of these buildings is 50% more energy efficient than a hypothetical building was in the past. It's all computer modeling. We look at the buildings, we computer model building as if it was meeting ASHRAE standards. That's the American Society of Heating, Air Conditioning, and Refrigeration Engineers. I think I got that right. Marlon can correct me if I'm wrong later. But they have to meet these standards. Look at sometime in the past. Let's say it's 2007. We look at a building that was placed in service, let's say in 2018. Do a computer model. Is this building more energy efficient than the hypothetical version of this building would have been in 2007? If so, it's 50% more energy efficient. I get to accelerate $1.80 a square foot of depreciation from 39 years to 1 year. That's the value. It's accelerating depreciation. The current law allows me to break that down into components, and I can get 60 cents a square foot if I meet HVAC requirements or building envelope requirements or lighting requirements. That's going to go away starting in 2023. We still live under those rules in 2022. In 2023, it's all or nothing. And the percentage of energy reduction is changing too, and we'll talk about that, but it's all or nothing. We can't break it down into individual components anymore starting next year. We live under the same rules this year. 2022, same rules we've always been. Starting next year, and we've already mentioned this, but nonprofit tax-exempt organizations can allocate this to the designer of their property. They can't use this deduction. Government entities can't use this deduction. They're not a tax-paying entity. Therefore, they're allowed, as an incentive to make these buildings more energy efficient, they're allowed to allocate this deduction to the designer, which is designers typically your engineer, your architect, your general contractor, your mechanical contractor. Somebody in that realm is who gets this allocated, gets this free deduction. That's expanding in the year 23 to include nonprofits, which also include private colleges, university, includes tribal governments. There's a lot of things that fall into this arena. The credit not only enhanced that way, or deduction, not credit, sorry, that deduction not only enhanced that way, the deduction can be as high as $5 per square foot starting in the year 2023, almost 3 times what it was in the past. And so what that's going to do is allow us to look at smaller buildings to get this deduction, because the value is based on the size of the building. And in reality, we wanted something at a minimum 10,000 square feet, probably more like 20,000 square feet in the past. That's going to shrink starting the year 2023. We're going to be able to help smaller buildings, the owners of smaller buildings or designers of smaller buildings take advantage of this deduction, because the value of that deduction will go up because it's $1 per square foot value. I had mentioned earlier, the threshold to qualify is changing. It's no longer going to be 50% more energy efficient, but it's going to be 25%. We lower the threshold, but, and Marlon will talk about this, we also have a more stringent base period we look at. And so it'll be harder to hit. It would be hard to hit the 50%. And that's one reason they changed it to 25. There was a secondary rule out there called the interim lighting rule, where you can get anywhere from 30 cents to 60 cents a square foot if you're only looking at lighting. That is still exists in 2022. That will go away in 2023. And now an interesting thing is this deduction could be taken every 3 years. In the past, if you had a building, you did it once on a building, you couldn't do it again. But if you do some work on this same building you already took this for, you could potentially every 3 years take this accelerated depreciation. That's another change. Those are some significant changes. Again, Marlon's going to expand on that in a few minutes. But the one thing I want to point out, many of you are probably familiar with cost segregation. Cost segregation you can do on a property you purchased. 179, a purchase itself is not good enough. You have to do something to that building. And something is build it from the ground up, or do some kind of remodel, addition, enhancement, and retrofit improvement, something to the building. Purchase alone is not enough. Types of buildings, I think you all have an idea what a commercial building is or what a government building. The one point I want to point out, and this is 22 rules, the one thing I want to point out and past is apartment buildings 4 stories or more above ground are 179D eligible. That's going to be important when we talk about 45L in a second as well. But just remember that apartment buildings 4 stories or more above ground are also considered a commercial building for 179D. Starting in 2023, again, nonprofits we can pull in, which includes nonprofit entities, instrumentalities, tribal governments, the private college and university. You saw the list. This is not all inclusive. Bottom line, nonprofit tax exempt organizations can now allocate this as well. Let's do a quick math, and I'm going to go through this fairly fast because we have a lot to touch on today. Under the old rules, if we had a 100,000 square foot building and we qualified for everything, that would have been a $180,000 deduction. If we were in a 37% bracket, that's a $66,000 tax savings. That is time value of money for that building owner. Hey, I would have got, all things being equal, tax rates and everything else, I would have got that $66,000 over 39 years. Well, now I get it in 1 year. Time value of money. That's important. That's worth a lot more to me today than it would have been over 39 years. For the designer of the government building and now going forward, the tax exempt building, that's a free deduction to that designer. That's not a time value of money anymore. That's in this scenario, that $66,000 savings is money you as the tax advisor, the tax preparer just put back into that business's pocket because they didn't know this existed. They didn't know they had this deduction. Now, all of a sudden you just put $66,000 in their business. That's a big deal. It becomes a bigger deal in 2023 if they meet the requirements, because that same 100,000 square foot building, if it meets the requirements, well, we'll talk about with Marlon in a minute, but if it meets the requirements to qualify at a minimum, it'd be 25% reduction in energy usage. At that level, you get the $22.50 per square foot deduction at the 100,000 square feet at a 37% tax bracket. It's a $92,000 savings. So you went from $66,000 hitting the minimum levels, a $92,500 savings. And if you hit the maximum levels, it's a sliding scale going forward, that 50% reduction in energy usage plus some prevailing wage rules, which maybe touch on a little bit through here and through 45L, that deduction could go as high as $5 a square foot, a $500,000 deduction, creating in this scenario, $185,000 savings, almost triple what it was under the old rules. That's why I said at the beginning, Marlon is going to become a very busy person because there is going to be a lot more opportunities for taxpayers to take advantage of the 179D, not just commercial building owners, not just government buildings, but now tax exempt buildings as well. Another example is if we didn't meet the prevailing wage rules, just be the bottom line, there's still a deduction out there. It's just smaller. I'm not going to spend time on that example. You will all get copies of these slides. I want to ask Marlon to come back on camera and hopefully on audio as too, which I'm sure he is. And Absolutely. Let's just, all right, there he's there. So Marlon, let's go through this real quick. Just these changes are obviously pretty significant. And let's talk, I mentioned the ASHRAE standards. And, in past we were, I think originally we compared to 2007, another year we compared to 2012. Are these standards for ASHRAE standards going to change every year? And how's that going to affect our 179D?
Great question. So that's a trick question. Actually, they are going to, yes and no. So ASHRAE standards are constantly changing. They're going to change every year, and they're going to come every 3 years. So typically, like you said, before we were using ASHRAE 2007 and 2012. This year, it has to be, you have to use the standard 2 years prior to the place in service. So with that being said, if your place in service building is 2021, the ASHRAE standards that you have to abide by is going to be ASHRAE 91 2019. And they're a lot more, I guess you would say, stringent on the efficiencies. So it will be a little bit harder to reach, but as these ASHRAE standards come out, building codes update as well. So if you're, designing to the building codes in today's, society, then you should be fine. There should be nothing to worry about.
And that's one reason they probably dropped it from a 50% reduction to a 25, because the standards are more current standards that we compare it to.
Yeah, okay. And that's the whole purpose of this deduction. They want to keep that challenge going. So
okay, makes a lot of sense. And then I touched on it, but the prevailing wage, there's a secondary rule in here, not only hitting the 25% or 50%, there's also a rule in here that says we have to be paying prevailing wages and apprenticeship requirements. And if we don't, it doesn't mean it eliminates a deduction, right? But it affects it some way. Is that correct?
That is correct. So it is going to affect it just a little bit. The deduction amount is going to change. So instead of getting, like, let's say $2.50 a square foot, if it doesn't meet and it's at the 25% threshold, you're now looking at 50 cents per square foot. So it drops the deduction a good little bit, but you're still receiving a deduction. And as far as each qualifying percentage over that 25% threshold, it now goes from 10 cents to 2 cents. And if it hits above that 50% threshold, instead of that $5 square foot, we're looking at $1 square foot. So okay. You're still getting something back, but it's just not as much.
Reduce. So it doesn't eliminate it. It just will reduce it. All right. Well, before I ask you the last question, I'm gonna put up polling question number 1. I didn't tell you at the beginning just because I am so into this presentation. Not you, Marlon. Everybody else. This is for CPE. You do need to answer 3 of the 4 polling questions that are going to pop up. I'm popping up the first polling question right now. Make sure you answer that. Your CPE certificate is going to be sent to the email you registered with. Mark is also going to send your copy of the slides to that same email as well, unless Mark tells me something different. All right, one last question then. And I mentioned it, but is there some tax exempt entities that you would like to highlight that now can be, starting in 2383, can allocate this deduction?
Yeah, so there are some new ones. They're going to be like private owned buildings such as schools, universities, maybe some hospitals, even some churches, some private foundations, and even some political organizations. Like you said, this is going to open up a broad range of new opportunities for this deduction.
All right. And this is going to play out obviously over the next couple of years, but I mean, do you agree with me? I think you're going to be a lot busier coming up.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited because we get a chance to actually model some of these buildings that we haven't modeled before. This is a whole new world for us right now. So it's something exciting to look forward to.
All right, Marlon. Well, thank you for that. This is when this came out, I was very excited about it. I think we have a lot to dig in still, but I think this is going to be great for taxpayers and tax advisors as well, to be able to have another opportunity they could bring to their clients.
Great job, Marlon. Randy, I meant to tell you, you got the ASHRAE name exactly correct. So great job, man.
All right, thank you.
All right.
It's been a while, I think, since I said it out loud. All right, next thing we're going to jump into then is 45L. And so this is another energy efficient incentive. This is for residential property. Again, significant changes on this. Everything in this IRA when we come to energy efficiency is really to help reduce, help our environment from an energy efficiency standpoint. And this is what they're looking to do. So this is, and I think as John Kapral has said it to me, this is a tax bill, but it's a lot more than a tax bill. All right, so who is this for? It's for developers of residential property. That hasn't changed. We don't have any new, unless Dave tells me otherwise. I don't think there's a lot of new candidates other than a developer. This was defined in 05. It's never been permanent part of the tax code. It's still not permanent part of the tax code, but in the IRA, we did have this extended through 2032, longest extension we've ever got. So as permanent as we've had it, and so we expect a lot of new companies, developers to be able to work with it. Historically, it's been a $2,000 per unit credit. This is going to become as high as, beginning in 2023, we are status quo for 2022 still. 2023, it could be as high as a $5,000 per unit credit. Significant. This is, in the past, maybe we wanted to see 50 units to make this make sense for a developer. Obviously, if we got 2.5 times the amount of credit, maybe we have 2.5 times less the buildings that times and less. I don't know if that goes together, but you know what I mean, where it could take advantage of this still. So there's smaller developers where we may be able to help because there's going to be a bigger credit starting in 2023. Current program is, this is available for properties that are 3 stories or less above ground. 179D, we talk apartment buildings 4 stories or more, are 179D. These residential properties hit under the current requirements, 3 stories or less. That goes away in 2023. We no longer have a height requirement. And so if we're more than 4 stories, still 45 eligible, at least to look at. The interesting thing is those apartment buildings 4 stories or more above ground that are 179D eligible will also now be 45 eligible. So they could take advantage of this accelerated depreciation as a deduction under 179D. They can also take advantage of a credit if they qualify for both. So that's a big change that happened. The old rules, I don't really think I need to go into it, other than the fact that we compared to 2006 energy standards. We did a computer modeling. I don't think we need to go deep into that, because more important is what are the new rules, and Dave will expand on this more. There is no longer this rule of comparing to this wow, I got a touch screen monitor, which I keep forgetting. No longer comparing to these IECC standards. Now it's all based on Energy Star rules, and Energy Star certification or zero energy home ready programs. These are the new rules that Dave will expand on that we look at when we determine if you're eligible for this credit. The credit can range from $2,500 to $5,000 for single family home and manufactured homes. The range is $500 to $5,000 per multifamily dwellings. Again, we need to meet these prevailing wage requirements to get the max credit in this case. And these, again, all kick in 2023. So I'm going to go pretty quick into the section with Dave, because he can explain this a lot better than I can. But bottom line is, under those old rules, $2,000 per unit credit, if you had 50, obviously we all can do math. Most of us could do math. We had $100,000 credit if we had 50 units to qualify. That same developer has 50 units to qualify starting in 2023 at the max. $250,000 credit. I say this plenty of times. You as the tax advisor, go save a taxpayer $250,000. It doesn't matter if they're making millions already. They're going to be pretty happy with you. And so these new rules kick in, can really help a lot of these businesses. So Dave, I'm pulling you in quick. I know you have a lot to talk about. Is Dave not there? Okay. Oh, you scared me there a second, Dave. I didn't see you. I trust you. I always know you got my back. So I'm glad you're there. So let's go into a few things, because 45L I don't even think we know everything that's going to happen. We know, but the effects that's going to be. So what do you think we should expect with these changes over the, starting next year?
Yeah, so loaded question. First off, I guess you could take it in pieces. In one perspective, like you talked about, the credit is still there to incentivize construction of energy efficient homes. So that hasn't changed. However, the integration of the Energy Star program changes how it's done. So how we evaluate, right? So at a very high level, you covered a lot of it, but starting in 2023, Energy Star certification is going to be required for single family, multifamily, or manufactured homes. They each have their own programs. So the requirements for each of those groups are slightly different, but they're tailored for each one. And so that's what's the minimum requirement for 45L. It's also the prerequisite for the additional credit for the DOE Zero Energy Ready Home program. So the 45L credit's up to $2,500, and then there's an additional $2,500 if you also qualify for the Zero Energy Ready Home program. So there's now kind of that extra incentive, that max incentive you talked about, is tied to another program. So biggest changes, obviously the addition of the larger credit with Zero Energy Ready Home program is a big deal. You talked about it with your numbers. I mean, that could change a builder's perspective on his development. Maybe it's worth doing some additional research to figure out what it takes to get Zero Energy Ready Home. What does it cost? You probably market it that way, and then, hey, you can even get a bigger credit. So it doesn't just change what it may change what they're going to do. So that's one of the most notable changes. The other is the multifamily home credit and the prevailing wage requirement attachment to that. So you mentioned it in 179D that the program, they raised the bar. They raised the base for comparing current properties. 45L did the same thing. So Energy Star uses much more current properties to evaluate the home against. So it's hard to say. I mean, the bar is raised from what it used to be. A typical Energy Star certified home is 10 to 20% more efficient than a typical home. So in the past, we would have talked about that 2006 standard. Now we're talking about much more current homes, 2-year-old properties. You're going to be 10 to 20% more efficient than that in order to qualify. Now, then Zero Energy Ready Home, that same home has got to be more like 40% more efficient than a typical home to qualify for that Zero Energy Ready component of the program, right? Some of the other changes, I know it's a long-winded answer there, Randy.
No,
but,
you go. I
figure I'll give you a break from talking, or give everybody a break from you for a few minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So touch on the manufactured home component. We didn't get into it. You didn't get into it in the slides today, but there used to be, or there is still currently, an opportunity for manufactured homes to get a $1,000 credit if they meet a lesser efficiency target. So instead of that 50% over the target that currently exists, they could meet the 30% target and get a $1,000 credit. That goes away. So there's no multi-level incentive for manufactured home. It's going to be follow the program for Energy Star, you can get your $2,500 credit. So that's a big change for the manufactured home groups. Multifamily, big changes. You talked about the important ones. So starting in 2023, the prevailing wage requirement's a factor to get the max credit. So the $2,500 per unit credit for multifamily properties drops to $500 per unit if you don't meet that prevailing wage requirement. Similar, that extra $2,500 for Zero Energy Ready homes also drops to $500. So you could have, if you don't meet the prevailing wage requirement for multifamily, you're looking at a $500 or a $1,000 credit per unit. So it's a pretty big impact there. However, we lost the height requirement, right? So that could change the game. Used to be limited to 3 stories or more. Now that's no longer a factor, right? So you could be looking at high-rise multifamily properties. There was also a consolidation of within some of the Energy Star programs, the townhomes and 2 residential unit dwellings are now part of single family homes. So they're no longer a multifamily property. If it's a 2-unit dwelling, it's considered single family. Additions to the opportunities for 45L, dormitories, residence halls. So prior to our current program, Dormitories, residence halls would not be included because they may not have provided kitchens or direct bathrooms to the units. So the Energy Star requirements, they have sleeping units as opposed to dwelling units. So they can now be considered a multifamily property. So it opens up a couple additional potentials. So
no
hotels,
longer, sorry, Dave, no longer the self-contained bathroom, kitchen, sleeping area in one unit under these new rules that'll qualify a dorm without that.
yeah, it's just an additional component. So the dwelling unit as we used to define it was still there, but they added sleeping units, I think is what they're called.
Oh, wow, nice.
Also qualifies. So, but they still have to be more set up for permanent residents. So like hotels, senior care centers, things like that, those are still not eligible because they're more of a temporary build housing setup instead of a permanent residential dwelling or sleeping area. So I think that was some of the big criteria. You had a follow-up question, right? About what do we prepare for? So kind of jump into that. The things you got to think about is don't wait for properties to be completed to look at 45L. So your clients come to you and you find out they've done some developments of multifamily. At the point of completion, it's a lot more difficult to look at meeting Energy Star requirements after they're completed. And even more so the zero energy ready home requirements. So if you have clients that are in residential construction, talking to them about 45L, talking to them about some of these changes, just mentioning like, hey, it's tied to the Energy Star program, it's tied to zero energy ready home program, that can get them looking to figure out, do we qualify for this stuff? Because there is some more work on a developer that needs to happen during construction to qualify for Energy Star and zero energy ready home programs. So don't wait. Proactively talk about that to the potential clients or potential your clients that are in the industry.
So we can evaluate them before it's finished or occupied, or we want to do that for sure.
Yeah, currently, absolutely. We can do it before and after a lot easier in the current program. Starting in 2023, there's more stages of inspection during construction that have to happen to meet Energy Star. So you want to be upfront in the process. Don't wait till they're done. So we want to get it done earlier.
Okay. And I know there was some other follow-ups with some of these. I don't know if you want to address that. Otherwise, we can just go to the remodeling as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that qualifies. Right? It's a simple answer. Yes, significant remodels still qualify for can qualify for Energy Star and can currently qualify. But if you're, I guess think of it as like a facelift. If you're doing some very minimal cosmetic updates, it's not going to qualify. You're going to have to get into the building envelope, insulation, things of that nature to qualify. But it's remodeling projects will qualify under the Energy Star program as well.
Okay, and I just want to let everybody know as we're talking here, I did pop up webinar polling question number 2. We have 2 more to go to, and this is just talking about, do you think these enhancements are really going to have more users of the 45L going forward? And I didn't tell you the answers on the last one, but so I think it was 35% of you have worked on a 170/90 in the past. It looks like on this poll, everybody thinks that 45L is, so everybody thinks you're going to be busier too as well, Dave, because we had 92% saying that they expect the 45L to be a lot more prevalent out there.
Good.
All right, any follow-ups or anything you want to add, Dave, before we move on to R&D?
Doing a great job, Randy.
That's what I was fishing for. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate your help. Question number 2, I have 84% of you participating. I'm going to close this in about 5 seconds because we still have a lot to get to in the next 22 minutes. And I'm going to warn you ahead of time. We very well could go more than an hour. Obviously, you are free to drop off anytime as long as you've met 3 of the 4 polling questions and answered and stayed logged in for 50 minutes because there's so much to go in here yet that we may go a little over today. All right, I'm ending this poll and moving on to the next session. And 92% of you do agree that this is going to be a lot more prevalent of a credit going forward. All right, R&D. We talked about R&D a lot in the past. We're not going to touch on R&D much here other than the changes because we have a lot to get to. Big uses of R&D, manufacturers, software developers, high-tech startups are going to be very important moving forward with the new rules that Randy and I are going to talk about. Randy Burge. Definition of R&D, just have a client that's developing a new or improved product or process. That's really what we want to look for to see. Are they putting something together that has technology involved in it? You're going to see that in manufacturing, you're going to see it in software. You're going to see it in areas you wouldn't think, because you have clients that are doing software development for their business that you wouldn't even realize. So you're going to see credits in places that you potentially wouldn't have in the past. Couple of enhancements to the credit that happened in the PATH Act, but then the IRA actually made additional enhancement. And this is where we want to spend a decent amount of time today. Is the PATH Act back in 2016, I think is when this kicked in, made the R&D tax credit a lot more user-friendly. You can offset AMT with it if you're less than average gross receipts of $50 million for the last 3 years. Huge change. Another huge change that came out in there is that startups can use the credit to offset payroll taxes. And startups were defined as companies that had less than $5 million in gross receipts in the current year and no gross receipts further back than the last 5 years. And if that was the case, what they could do is elect to take a credit value up to, obviously they have to generate this credit value, up to $250,000 and offset employer portion of Social Security taxes with the credit. So you turn an income tax credit into a Social Security payroll tax credit. The IRA actually increased that limit from $250,000 to $500,000. What it also did is said, after you've offset all the employer portion of Social Security taxes, if there's excess, you can now offset payroll or Medicare taxes as well. So it made it easier to use a larger credit. In general, a $250,000 credit for a $5 million business is hard to get to. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but that's hard. I mean, you're going to need, $2.5 million of expenses to qualify for a $5 million startup business. That might not be the easiest. To get to 500, again, might not be easiest, but there's going to be a unique set of clients that are going to be a great target for certain tax preparers to go after that can be able to use this credit going forward. And with that being said, I want to bring Randy Burge in to talk about this and just a little bit about Randy. If you could put your camera live and your mic, Randy, that'd be great. So Randy came to us this year. Randy has a long, and I'm not saying he's old, but he's got a long and storied history dealing with these high-tech startups that I'm mentioning. He's in New Mexico. He actually was the founder of the New Mexico Tax Council, and he dealt with some of the larger R&D companies, advanced technology, chip plants, all these things out there. And so I think he's a great person to bring in here to kind of talk about this new CHIPS Act ecosystem with us. So Randy, you want to take it over and just let me know when you need me to change the slide.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to be rather short here. We are limited on time. I took the conventional Venn diagram and changed it to the Venn diagram to try to illustrate very quickly what this ecosystem looks like. Basically, there's the CHIPS legislation, and the industry is responding to that in various ways, as are the economic development organizations that are there in your region. They vary by concentration in your region. The industry and the EDOs differ, but they are a great resource for your local firms to look into and partner with in a deeper way than you may have done in the past. Essentially, though, this model, the Venn diagram, shows you that by partnering with others, certainly we hope with Tri-Merit, but to work on this ecosystem. The economic development organizations range from the federal, state, and local. You're probably familiar with your local economic development organization. Another partner in this whole arena is universities and labs. One of the Micron fabs in upstate New York is based in a university. So you want to be checking on those sources as well to see what they're doing. Incubators and accelerators are very important. A lot of these new startup companies we're talking about, the tech startups, start in an incubator or accelerator organization to bring resources to them. And of course, the industry trade associations like the New Mexico Tech Council and those organizations like that in your region are very important to team up with. So basically, the way to win in this ecosystem is to engage with it. So certainly look at your different organizations, and we're a resource here too to help you go through that as you need questions answered, that sort of thing. Okay, next slide. One of the things that's really important with this is you think of the chip industry as this huge, macro 5, 10, $15 billion fabs. But basically, those fabs work on an ecosystem that extends in far different directions with companies in your local area that you might not even know about. So what I did here was try to illustrate the type of small and mid-sized companies that may be in your area. And so I pulled Dun & Bradstreet here and looked at company sizes that really kind of work with the small and medium-sized accounting firms. But the opportunity here is immense. Looking at companies that are specifically addressing the semiconductor manufacturing area, $5 to $50 million size companies. There's 922 of those just in the semiconductor industry alone, supporting the larger fabs. 50 to 100 million, 288, and then a nice size company, 100 million to 1 billion. That's still not your major fab semiconductor operators, but 894. So you see very clearly, just in the industry, the semiconductor manufacturing industry, and all the different subcomponents that go with it, there's a huge number of companies to target. Now, I also looked at, okay, so we have the semiconductor chips being made, but where do they go? And they go into all kinds of different things, from aerospace to transportation, automobiles, and that sort of thing. So there, I pulled Dun & Bradstreet. I came up with 27 industries, specific industries that use chips in their manufacturing processes. And so I, again, kind of sized it down to our small and medium-sized accounting firms. But you see across the country, there are 27,000 of those sorts of companies. So it's a dynamic market, it's accessible, and I think by engaging in the entire ecosystem that we illustrated earlier, you'll have a better chance of accessing those. So next slide. And I think you already covered this a little bit already, this new the payroll tax deduction for tech startups. But there's a couple key points here. Before, there was no way for the small or startup and early stage companies to access the R&D tax credit. This gives a pathway for them to do that. It certainly enhances the innovation cycle. It also helps with investment. If we're able to extend the runways for these small companies, startup companies, in any shape or form, it's a great thing. So investors really like this particular credit. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, as we talk here, I'm going to put up polling question number 3. But I think the bottom line here, this whole CHIPS bill is put in place to help us, as we said at the beginning. Our percentage in the U.S. of manufacturing of semiconductors and chips has dropped dramatically, and we've seen that be a major impact to us. So when this bill came out, I think a lot of people thought, okay, what's going to help these, Intels or whoever these big giant chip manufacturers are? It is going to, but what you're saying is, this is going to trickle down to the clients we all deal with. And it's not only going to trickle down to the clients we deal with, it's going to trickle down to the clients that support the clients we deal with, because now the sandwich shop that's supporting the local manufacturer that's supporting the Intel plant, the fab, is now going to be affected. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for tax firms that are dealing with companies that support this industry. You don't have to be dealing with the multi-billion-dollar taxpayer to be able to see a benefit for the clients you're working with. There's a lot down that, as you call it, the ecosystem that are going to be affected by
Right.
this.
My recommendation is just to get to know and look into your local regional ecosystem, because that's where the conversations will be happening and the action is going to be happening. So that's what I recommend.
All right, Randy. Well, thank you for your insights, and I'll say we had perfect timing bringing you on board, because this is going to be a huge opportunity for us, as well as the CPAs we support, the tax preparers we support, with all this money being able to go into these areas. So again, thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to end polling question number 3, and we have do you currently work with any startups that might benefit from hire? And 33% of you say yes. So that's nice to see. That's a bigger number than I thought. But I end this polling question, and we are going to move on in the presentation. So we now have had the one thing that I wanted to touch on, and I'm only going to spend a second on here, is you've all heard the 174 R&D expense capitalization rules have kicked in January 1st of this year. Hope you've heard that. If not, you need to be aware of it. Reach out to us if you want more information. This was originally defined in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. It was kicked down the road till 2022. We never expected to kick in, but unfortunately it did kick in. Congress has had multiple opportunities to get rid of this year. They could have done it in a handful of bills. They could have done it in the American Rescue. That was last year. They could have done it at least in the CHIPS bill. They could have done it in the Inflation Reduction Act. They could have just done it in the standalone. They could have done a lot of opportunities to get rid of these capitalization rules, which is going to impact a lot more of your clients than you realize. They haven't got rid of it. So we all have to be aware of it. We had hoped it was going to be in this Inflation Reduction Act. In fact, it was in the Build Back Better bill, which became the Inflation Reduction Act, but unfortunately this was pulled out of it. So be aware of that. More information on that, you can reach out to us. With that being said, I told you we were going to probably go long, and I would stay on, because now we got John Kapral that's going to go into some of these major new incentives, investment tax credit, production credit, all these things. So John, who is currently on vacation in Hawaii and kind enough to jump on this. John, why don't you jump in and go through these other incentives for us?
Well, thanks, Randy. Thanks very much. Could you just go back one slide? I think I wanted to, let's see. Okay, yeah, no, you're good. Next one. Very good. Okay, so, all right. Well, that was very well said, stated, described. Randy Burge describing the ecosystem. Randy Crabtree enhancing that, bringing up the idea of, well, how does the rubber meet the road for us as practitioners, for you as CPAs? And so I think that our initial reaction to the CHIPS bill, of course, it seems like it's just one more large lobbyist-oriented tax package or benefits or incentives package. And it may look that on its face. What happens though is when you start looking underneath and start exploring where it comes from, why it's come into law, how it came so quickly, you really start to see the opportunity for your clients, for yourselves as practitioners. And so the idea really comes from this idea of, as Randy described, you know, we invented the semiconductor in the 60s, the 50s and 60s, Fairchild and Intel going forward, all the progeny since then. And so it's incredible how much of that lead we seem to have given away in the US. And it's interesting and ironic how that happened, because we have many semiconductor companies in the US, and we know them. They're all very, very household names: Texas Instruments, Intel, Micron, Marvel, Qualcomm, AMD. So we know those names. And so the thing is, this CHIPS Act, how is it going to affect our world? And really the interesting thing is those companies, very few of those companies actually make semiconductors in the US anymore. Like Randy was saying, in the 90s, almost 40% of the semiconductors were made here in the US. Now it's down to around 10%. most of those are made in Asia. 75% of our semiconductors come from primarily Taiwan. And so this is not just a matter of business development and economic growth and such. It's actually national security is part of the issue here. And so I believe that's part of the reason why Congress and the president acted so quickly here. Just yesterday, an additional request or ruling requirement came down and is now not allowing NVIDIA and AMD to sell some of their high-end chips to China. Unfortunately, this is something that's tied to all of the policy behind the CHIPS Act. If you follow the market, you see what happened to the semiconductor space today, which is ironic. You'd think it'd go the other way because of the CHIPS bill. There's going to be some adjustments, but it certainly will turn around. So here's where it benefits. So where are these chips made? They're offshore. We're bringing them back onshore. How are we going to do that? We're going to have to build fab plants. How do we do that? Does Intel they're going to get $27 billion to build one in Ohio? Yes. Micron's going to get some support for their $40 billion project, which is probably going to be in Boise? Yes. Qualcomm, this is really interesting. And this is now the root of what we're talking about, is going to be partnering with a local fab facility in upstate New York on a $4 billion project. That is a smaller business that is going to help leverage them. These are companies that are IP companies. They're typically not making these products anymore. They're licensing and having these made offshore, and we're bringing a lot of that back. So that's what's going on. All the infrastructure with that, all of the support that goes with that, all of the opportunities you can imagine. Construction companies, if you're working with construction companies and they're in any of these areas where these incentives are going to be spent, you're going to see booms in construction, and all the collateral vendors, subcontractors, and support businesses around that. And so again, notice I said Boise, upstate New York, and Ohio. Those are not coastal. Those are not Silicon Valley, which ironically is how it got its name. This is a US focused, domestic, inclusive, these small business incubators for startups, these rural training grants and such that Randy was alluding to, Randy Burge was alluding to in these ecosystems. This is why you want to look at those things, because that's where the money is going to go. And it's not going to flow to the coasts necessarily. It's going to be national. And this is a matter of a lot of things going on. So it's a really interesting program. Two things I want to focus on in the next few minutes. In the Inflation Recovery Act, Reduction Act, rather, there was a really interesting provision, renewal of this 48 Cap C Advanced Energy Project Credit. This is something that came into law under the Recovery Act in 2009. It was fairly esoteric. It applied to companies that made things that were used to generate or build renewable energy devices and such. So if you were a turbine manufacturer or a solar manufacturer, you were able to access this program. It was awarded $2.3 billion in 2009. It was all spent by 2017, and actually by 2003. And Randy, I think you've got a question there.
Yeah, I was going to pop up the last question just in case anybody has to jump off at an hour, but I would recommend nobody jump off, because the stuff is going to be unbelievably, that what John's going through here is huge for you as an advisor and your clients. So I'm just going to leave far up there. And John, if you want to keep going.
All right. So this $2.3 billion program, we spent it and it went away. It was renewed. It was brought back to life in this IRA. And so the way it works today is it's now $10 billion additional funding, over 4x when it was funded in 2009, which at the time was a large amount of money toward focused on businesses that are in the renewable energy space. it today is either a 6% or a 30% credit, an ITC of qualifying investment. And the reason the 6 or 30, and again, this goes to fair employment practices, apprenticeships, and unions and such, using union labor and such. So you still will get the credit if you follow none of that, or if you follow it, then you get the 30% credit. So that's what that's about. Here's what's really fascinating, and this is something that changes the game a bit. You can elect to treat this ITC as a tax payment. So thinking on its surface, what does that mean? Big deal. I'm going to pay a tax and I have a credit. What if I elect to be a tax payment? What does that do for me? Well, it does this for you. If you elect it as a tax payment, you can not only reduce your tax to zero, now essentially it becomes a refundable credit. Think about that. This ITC for advanced energy projects is effectively going to be a refundable credit. That's big. In addition, and this is a tie back to the 2009 law, it can actually be transferred. So, and you see that because you had syndicates and investor groups coming into this space, and the reason was they were plugging a hole when Lehman Brothers collapsed, because they were the primary funding vehicle for a lot of renewable energy projects. And so there had to be there was this grant in lieu of credit and such that you might remember. And so this idea of transferability was very important to facilitate financing of these kinds of transactions. So those are two interesting aspects of this. So Randy, next slide, and I'll get into some of the details.
This was, sorry, I broke your slide into 2 before, so I don't know if you wanted to go over this as well.
Okay, I see. Let's see, let me see. Let's finish the energy and then I'll get back into this one. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Here?
the next one, and then we'll come back. We'll jump back.
Okay.
Yep. So here's what we've got. This is the original 48 cap C from 2009. Category 1 would be these types of activities, these types of projects. We're going to skip over this, not going to get into it. You can get the slides later. So this was the original 48 cap C. The new 48 cap C adds categories 2 and 3. So Randy, let's go to category 2. Next slide. So this is new. So now you do not just necessarily have to be making renewable energy products. You can be a company that is re-equipping your manufacturing plant to reduce greenhouse gas. This is new, this is big, and this will apply to many more companies than the previous 48 cap C. And don't forget, this is a refundable credit. Put a bookmark there. This is important. Next slide. So here's the additional category added under the new 48 cap C. Re-equipping, expanding, or establishing industrial or manufacturing plants to recycle critical materials. This is new. Conceptually, think about it. We're building all of these turbines. We're building all of these batteries. We're building all of these new renewable energy generator and storage. And what happens is, though, they depreciate, they age out. And so they've got to be recycled in some way. There are now provisions allowing plants, businesses, companies to come into existence to service those needs. These are new ideas and concepts that it's a concern. Lithium batteries, very big concern of the toxicity. But at this point, it's now over 90% of a lithium battery can be recycled, and it's approaching 100% in some experimental stages. And so this is the infrastructures needed around that. So if you're an existing company, or if you want to be a new company doing some of these technologies, again, this is a refundable credit. Okay, next, I think we're going to finish the energy. Okay, now can we skip back a couple of slides, Randy? Sorry about jumping around. I wanted to do that first. I wanted to do the advanced energy credit first. I cherry picked, I took the two primary investment tax credits in the IRA and in CHIPS. I took one from each. The next, so if we go forward one slide, and then that will be one more. Oh, I'm sorry, go back. I'm sorry about this.
No problem.
Yeah, I want to go back to the 48 cap D.
Okay, I'm sorry. We'll get there for
There it is, right there, right there.
You got it?
Got it. Okay, here, this is big. This is big. So this, one more back.
No, I'm sorry, John. I'm going.
There
I'm going D. There's you go.
There it is, right there. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So keep this in mind. 48 cap C is in IRA. 48 cap D is in CHIPS. But they work together because they go to manufacturing. Investment tax credits for manufacturers. Manufacturing. You can be Intel, you can be AMD, but you can also be a much lesser known business, household name business, and still qualify for these. So this is not just limited to large companies. So here's how 48 cap D, Advanced Manufacturing Investment Credit, works. This is the one that we've been reading about that is targeting the semiconductor industry in the US to onshore that production, manufacturing that we have not been doing, and we've been somewhat at risk, both economically. We've been losing ground in competitively, and they're now the national security issues and supply chain issues that we saw. Semiconductors, like Randy was saying, yes, they're in supercomputers. NASA uses them, and that's how they started in the 50s and 60s. But your washing machine, your refrigerator have these. Without semiconductors, we're dead in the water. You saw all of the inventory of vehicles in the last year or so just backed up because they didn't have chips. So here's how you qualify for this. And also, by the way, this is the same thing as the 48 cap C ITC for advanced energy projects. Advanced Manufacturing Investment Tax Credit is also a refundable credit in the same way. You could elect to treat it as a tax payment. This one cannot be transferred because it's different, but you still can get the refundability. And even if you have no tax due, you can still get a refund of this classified tax payment. So it applies to qualified investment in an advanced manufacturing facility, defined as a plant that manufactures semiconductors, which we have very few of those in the US today. Texas Instruments has some, Micron has one, has a few. They're just very few, but we're going to have a lot more coming online in the next few years. And this is not simply going to be Micron breaking ground on a new facility. This is going to be partnering with existing forges, foundries, fab plants that are already doing contract work, that have already been servicing these contracts. So that's what we're looking at, is the fabricators, fabs or foundries. And then these are like I said, most often are not the multinationals today in the US. These are family businesses. These are companies that have been around for a while. They're not publicly traded. They're not well known, but they're essential. So once we've identified those, the plants that also manufacture equipment used by these fabs, and there's a highly specialized equipment, wafer fabrication. These clean rooms in fabrication plants are on par with biotech industry, pharma. They have to be cleaner than clean. So there's a lot of specialized equipment, and including the fabrication and the assembly, and also the test equipment. So opportunities here are great for these types of businesses. So Randy, next slide, if we can go through the energy things and pick up again with the 40 cap D. Okay, here we go, right there. A couple of quick things. It's a 25% ITC, all qualifying US taxpayers. You could be a foreign company if you're a US taxpayer and invest in a US fab. It's depreciable, amortizable property, integral operation manufacturing facility, not administrative offices. So that's why, for instance, Intel is doing a $27 billion plant in Ohio. They're going to get about a $4 billion ITC from it because there are other costs that do not qualify. But again, this is another reason why we look at this when we're evaluating a project. For instance, this type of project, an ITC like this, can be bundled up. You would certainly want to be looking at a cost segregation. You'd want to be looking 179 cap D for these facilities. R&D credits goes without saying. So you look at these opportunities, if you do have clients in this space, or if you find startup clients by working through your ecosystem in this space, tremendous opportunities here. Depreciable amortizable property. Again, you can have bonus depreciation on some of this. You can as I said, take the 179 cap D if it qualifies. And this is going to be between 2023 and 2026. So it's the next 4 years. And it's got to be, you cannot, and the company that's taking the ITC cannot have any material expansion in any of these 4 entities of concern. That'd be North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, or any terrorist identified nation. And that's within 10 years of placed in service date. So what that means is you'd have a situation where you'd have a clawback of that credit, and it could be costly. And so this is the policy incentives behind this. It's not just tax and economic development, national security as well. And so if you're an S corp or an LLC, you can also take advantage of this, and it just works through your Schedule K and your K1s as a distributive share of this refundable credit. There's a basis reduction requirement. It's 50% of the credit. Those are some of the minutia. Randy, if there are any more slides, I think there might be one more. Okay, a couple of quick things, very, very quick. Clean vehicle credit, we've heard about this one and say, well, we're just subsidizing, people who can afford an expensive car. Not really, not really. It's not just that. It can be up to $7,500 per vehicle, of course, does assist with the manufacturing side. Also, there are some important provisions here. Critical minerals, battery components, and final assembly needs to be in North America. So these, again, are American jobs, American technology. And then there are some clean energy and production development credits, things that have been around, have been extended, have been modified, improved. That's another avenue. There is a lot in IRA, particularly because that's the one that relates more to the clean energy and renewables. And then the alternative fuel credits have been extended as well. I think one last slide. Okay, CHIPS Act. So CHIPS focuses on semiconductors. IRA is focused on the clean energy renewables. CHIPS focuses on semiconductors. A couple of other things that are not tax items necessarily, but certainly show the investment and support behind this. There's going to be $39 billion available in financial assistance for building, modernizing, and expanding domestic semiconductor facilities. Again, this is not just going to be Intel applying for these loans. This is going to be your family businesses, your smaller businesses. There's going to be an $11 billion fund for semiconductor R&D programs. Again, ties into your incubators, accelerators, universities, national laboratories. And this is going to be regional. It's not going to be one clearinghouse. This is going to be regional and decentralized and inclusive. And very important to keep that in mind. And then $1.5 billion fund for public wireless supply chain innovations. I think that's it, Randy, but
that was
sorry
it.
if it seemed rushed, but I wanted to get a lot of that out there for you.
No,
So
I knew we were going
listening.
to have a lot to do today. Every time I listen to John speak, I learned something new. So I appreciate it, John. It's always entertaining for me. So thank you. And we got a lot more on that. John could go deep into any of this stuff. The bottom line is he said, this is available for your client. And I'm guessing you're not working with Intel. This is available for many more clients than it looked like on the surface originally. Before we wrap up here, I just want to let you know, we have started taking registrations now open for our virtual conference at the end of the year. This is November 30th, December 1st. Here's the speakers that'll be at that conference. It's 10 hours of free CPE. Topics are going to range from, the great resignation or migration, as Jennifer Wilson calls it, to probably private equity talk with Alan Colton, to pricing issues. You see the group of speakers we have. It's a great group. I do want to tell you that we do have 2 webinars coming out at the end of this month. The 22nd, we will have a practice management webinar that will be announced shortly. And the 4 weeks from today, we are going to, I think we just decided this morning, there's a new presentation I've been doing, which is on mental health awareness beyond burnout. I think it's a very important topic for our profession that I'm going to be giving that 4 weeks from today on the 29th is what it looks like. And that's one I've been doing a lot lately, and it's been getting a lot of good feedback. So especially as we're in the middle of tax season, the never-ending tax season and deadlines and 2 weeks from today and in a month or 6 weeks from today, I think it's an important topic to discuss. So look for that to come out as well. I mentioned at the beginning, I thought we'd go over time. We did go over time. I really appreciate a lot of you sticking around because this information is really hot off the press and still being evolving as we go. But I appreciate everybody looking in. If you want more information from us, questions on this, you can go to scan that QR code right there to get to our website, or simply old school, type in try-merit.com and you can go to it that way. Thanks again, everybody. And I want to thank everybody that helped present today. We have a great group of individuals, very knowledgeable, that I love the fact that they can share their knowledge. Thanks again. Goodbye.